Hey. What's going on? What's going on, folks? Welcome to the YouTube Live from Day One Careers. It has been a while since I showed up, which is why if you guys are coming again, you may not even remember me, but basically, I'm Yevgeny, and together with Gigi, we run Day One Careers. So while everyone is coming through and while folks are still joining, so I'm just going to give you a short intro into myself, Day One Careers, and when Gigi comes in, then I'm sure she's going to do exactly the same. But at any point in time, folks, please feel free to say hi in the comments box. Let us know where you're from. If you at any point in time you have any questions about behavioral interviews at Amazon, just type them in. But just so you guys know who I am, so as I mentioned before, my name is Yevgeny, and together with Gigi, we run Day One Careers. So Day One Careers, at Day One Careers, we're trying to make Amazon interview expertise available to as many people as we can. And we do this through our YouTube channel, our blog, with lots of different resources, both on the YouTube channel and blog. We also have plenty of paid resources that you can discover at dayone.careers and a whole bunch of other stuff, including a community. So how do we get to this wonderful life? So I'm going to give you an intro into myself, and then when Gigi joins, I'm sure she'll going to give you an intro about herself, but you'll probably know her anyway from all of the content that's online. So I spent just over 3 years at Amazon, and while I was at Amazon, I led the marketing team for Amazon Launchpad, and then I led the accessories category for Amazon devices in Europe. And this is Gigi. Hey, Gigi.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm here. I'm well.
You're back.
I'm
It
back.
feels like forever.
I know. And the only thing that should tell you that I'm moving office is the stuff behind my back, but I've even replicated the same background. So in a couple of weeks' time, it should be exactly as the good old days. But yes, I'm back.
Cool. Sorry, I'm just sending my husband a message because I know, but I'm on YouTube. I am live.
Yes, we are on YouTube, and I was giving an intro for myself. Do you want me to finish, and then you can jump in?
Yeah. I'm really embarrassed now. Don't do that, please. I've gone red.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought it's the top, but maybe not. So
It's a
anyway.
combination, actually.
Anyways, so so I've spent just over 3 years at Amazon, and I did 2 senior leadership roles, one in marketing and one in category leadership. And then what I started noticing is when I was interviewing for my team and for partner teams, the candidates who took some sort of training or otherwise invested quite a lot of effort into preparing themselves for their behavioral interviews, they did a lot better. What I also did is I ran some very small experiments, which is when I had a candidate with a very impressive CV with relevant experience, who I thought would be great for a role, but who perhaps wasn't prepared. And that's why normally, after the first phone screen, I would not progress them further into the interview process. What I would do is, instead of not progressing them, I would progress them to the next stage, which would be phone screen 2 for them. But what I would do, instead of essentially running the whole interview, I would cut the interview a little bit short, and I would give them a little bit of coaching. And then I was watching what was happening to these candidates who just received a little bit of coaching. And just with a tiny bit of coaching, candidates were able to progress further into the interview process. And that gave me an indication that actually it is possible to coach folks to do better in Amazon interviews. So at first I started running Day One Careers as a side gig. Then I left Amazon and joined Apple and spent 1 year at Apple while running Day One Careers as a side gig. And then at some point in time, someone who Gigi and I both ended up coaching at the same time said to me that, oh, you should absolutely meet with Gigi because she's super credible and amazing. And I met with Gigi, and we decided that we need to join forces under the Day One Careers brand. So the rest is history. Here we are. Now, Gigi, over to you.
Excellent. Thank you. Right. I've screamed at everyone in my family about all of the things that they need to do. So we're good to go. And I'm not branded today either, but I obviously got the memo. Like, we're wearing the same
Yeah,
color. I'm
I know,
impressed.
right?
Although obviously mine's a Star Trek one and yours isn't, but it's just because I'm cooler than you, really.
Always. Anyone is.
It's a low bar.
Easy
Okay.
to raise.
So, so Yevgeny's given you half of the story. I'll just give you the story up until the part where I met Yevgeny. So I was at Amazon for 5 years. I was a kind of a marketer. I worked at Prime Video and then went to work for Amazon Fresh, which is kind of the physical store side of things. Whilst I was there, along with everyone else, I was doing tons and tons of interviewing, and I also became a bar raiser. I'm sure most of you know what a bar raiser is. And like Yevgeny, I kind of spotted something in the candidates themselves. I wasn't giving free coaching like Yevgeny was and cheating the system. But what I did do was I could see that there were candidates who had obviously spoken to an experienced Amazonian and just knew what to say and how to say it, and those that obviously hadn't. And clearly, unsurprisingly, those that had did materially better in their interview, not necessarily because they had better experience or better impact, but just they were able to articulate it more specifically, and therefore we were able to gather the evidence. I started to get curious, as all good Amazonians do, and tried to see kind of what was out there in the market. Who were these candidates talking to? What type of coaching could they get? And it was a very small group of people back then. It was a couple of years ago, and it was expensive. You know, it was certainly exclusive to candidates who had plenty of money to spend. I thought that was unfair. So I started up a YouTube channel and just started dumping a whole lot of content out there based on my experience as a bar raiser. I then went on to leave Amazon and just thought I might try and see if I could just turn my knowledge and expertise into a side hustle. And the rest is as Yevgeny described it. So together we have this business that we're very proud of now. I think, Yevgeny, we've been going since February, is it? Together?
Yeah, we've been going
Yeah.
since February. Although it feels like it's been around for longer, but yes, it's just
Yeah.
February.
Yeah. So we've got like we've been lucky enough to have hundreds of candidates who have managed to get roles through looking at our content. Very exciting. We've got a couple of thousand people who are part of our free Discord community. We have a digital course that we try and make as accessible and affordable to as many people as possible. We obviously have the YouTube channel, which you all have seen because you're here. And I think we drop lots of content that's free on LinkedIn with useful tips and information. And this is part of that suite of things that we offer you. So the way this whole thing works is very simply, you ask us your questions down here in the little box on the right-hand side. We will endeavor to answer them. Couple of asks. Do you want me to, shall I do the asks, Yevgeny? Whilst you're
I can do the
sipping your
asks.
tea? Oh,
Well,
you do the ask, and I'm going to have a bite of my chocolate Kimberly.
oh, that's amazing. So, well, I've got one ask that I'm sort of that we usually give, and that is, if at all possible, folks, just type your question in one message, right? Because what happens is if you try to split your question into multiple messages, then it's very difficult for us to actually piece them together because other folks are going to be typing stuff in between your messages, and so it just becomes quite messy. So if you can just cram your question into one message, that would help us a lot. And then what are the other asks that we normally have?
The other ones, we have two other ones. The first is, please don't ask us very general questions. Hi, Gigi,
Oh, yeah.
Yevgeny, I've got a product manager interview tomorrow. Any tips? Of course, there's tips. There's about 200 videos worth of tips on YouTube. So if that's your question, please don't ask it. Just go check out the YouTube channel. You'll be amazed how much information is there. On the other side of things, please don't ask us super specific questions. For example, I have a solutions architect interview tomorrow. What technical questions can I expect? There are, I think, in the range of 10,000 different job families in Amazon now, and no one person / two people are going to be able to give you that level of expert knowledge on that level of different kind of job families. So again, please avoid asking those super specific questions. We're not going to be able to answer them, and we're likely just to skip over them. With that said, shall we get going?
Yes. Do you want me to pick?
Yeah, you pick one, and then
Cool.
I'll be looking for another.
All right. So, well, this is the two-part question that I can actually piece together because I can see part one and part two. So the first one is I finished my behavioral interview and the manager recommended me for the on-site interview. Great. So it's like it sounds like what you've actually finished is the phone screen, and then the manager recommended you for the on-site, which is great. But the recruiter said that the position was closed, and she had shared your profile with another manager for a similar position. There is no actual question here, but I suspect the general question is, what's up with this, and how do I navigate this situation? So it's a normal situation. It happens. Sometimes things happen. The role gets filled while you're being interviewed, and Amazon, differently to other companies, they don't compare candidates with each other unless you've got something like graduate recruitment where some form of that may take place. However, in the standard corporate recruitment, they're not going to be comparing candidates with each other, and they compare candidates with the whatever they believe the bar is for the role that you're interviewing for, and that bar is relevant to the current Amazonians doing this role that you're applying to, or similar role at the same level. Now, as soon as they interview someone who raises the bar, who they believe raises the bar, they have to offer that role to that person. So it's very possible that they decided to interview you even though they offered this role to someone else because they had to do it. Yeah, it's a first past the post system. There are some other situations where, for example, something happens, the role just disappears because the team was asked to trim their headcount and a whole bunch of other things. So it's a bittersweet situation. The good thing is you have been pre-cleared for Amazon for the same role at the same level. So you should really get and take the offer of your recruiter to find you a similar role. The other thing that you can do, probably should do, is you can ask the recruiter to tag you for other similar roles. And if the recruiter isn't bringing you any more roles, you should just feel free to apply to other relevant roles. And then the record on your interviewing file that says that you have successfully passed the loop, but the Amazon was unable to offer you the job because there was no job to offer you, it's actually a really good thing to have. So it's a bittersweet situation, but you can make the best out of it, and so can anyone else who is experiencing the same situation. Anything that you would add, Gigi?
No, other than I think MK was between round one and on-site. So rather than, you were talking about the hypothetical, if that happens when you've filled the role.
Correct.
No, nothing else to say. Sorry, apologies. I'm kind of half in the room and half not. So I'm going to pick another question. I haven't had my tea this afternoon. That's the problem, Yevgeny. I'm British, and without tea, we just don't function very well. Apologies, everybody. Right, so this is from Anna. So, hi, thanks for the amazing content. You are more than welcome, Anna. You're preparing for the behavioral interview, right? And you had a couple of big projects, more than a year, many LPs covered. Can I write it down as 2 big stories and tweak for each question? Okay, so my recommendation would be, rather than just write down 2 big stories and try and dump in as many leadership principles as possible into 2 big stories, you really think about how you could potentially partition this piece of work across a number of different kind of phases or swim lanes. So if your project is over a year long, I'm going to hypothesize that maybe there are 4 different stages of this project, kind of the original inception stage, the build stage, the delivery stage, the post kind of, what's it called? Wash up. That's what they would use at Amazon, kind of a wash up stage and a learning stage. Think about, can you break it up into chunks that represent particular phases in the project, and then use that phase in the project to talk about a story particular to one leadership principle. Other leadership principles will inevitably kind of filter into your story, but to craft a solid story, you're always better just to really think about one leadership principle first. So at a minimum, for a project that's over a year long, I would hope you could probably get 4 stories out of it, let's say. Or what you can do is divide it up into swim lanes. So if your project had multiple different work streams in that project that were delivering different elements of the project, you could potentially create different stories out of those swim lanes. So, four stories, 5 stories, 6 stories. It would depend on how complex the project was and how many different swim lanes it has. So I would suggest to you to be a little bit more ambitious about how many stories you can get out of this particular set of projects, because just chunking it into 2 and dumping in a whole lot of leadership principles will mean that on the day you would have to be a very, very quick thinker to be able to, on the fly, adapt those big chunk stories to actually answer the question that you have been given. Better to chunk it up into more stories that are focused on different leadership principles. That would be my suggestion anyway. Yevgeny, anything else?
100% agreed. 100% agreed. Okay.
Awesome. Well, I'll drop Anna back
So,
in and you can find another one.
yeah, well, I'm just going to go to the next one. And so this one is, I'd like to use a specific writing sample, but I know I'll want to use examples from it in my loop interview. Is this okay? I know we shouldn't reuse examples, but is that different for the writing sample? So generally speaking, we recommend to not repeat examples between phone screen and loop. And the only reason why we do this is because some bar raisers will be okay with it and some bar raisers will not be okay with it. Writing sample is a whole different thing. So it's just a test of writing. We are aware that some teams, sometimes, some hiring managers may wish to discuss the content of your writing sample with you in an interview context. It's not something that they should be doing, but some of them are doing it. Nonetheless, as long as what you're putting in your writing sample is an actual story, and if God forbid a hiring manager decides to ask you some questions about that story in an interview setting that you'll be happy to answer them, then I see absolutely no issues with you using the same story during your loop as with your writing sample, because again, it's a test of your writing and not a test of your competencies. Anything you'd add, Gigi?
No, I agree 100%.
Cool.
Okay, so all right, so let me just quickly jump. I'm gonna do 2 because one's really quick, so I'll do a second one so as not to be naughty. So here we go. Is an account manager ranked an L4? 3 years plus successful sales and account management experience. Yes, every single account manager that I've ever interviewed or moved into my team was an L4. So that was that quick one. And then I'm going to do another quick one here. What are the major LPs for an account manager? Okay, so we can't sit and tell you what the key LPs are for all of the different job families. As I said, there were probably about 10,000 of them, and there's no way Yevgeny or I, or even if we had a panel of 20 people here, would be able to tell you the key LPs for each different job family. What you need to do is go and look at your job description and try and identify from that job description what the important leadership principles appear to be. There is a playlist on the YouTube channel, which, by the way, I cleaned up last week whilst you were away, Yevgeny. I cleaned up the YouTube channel, put a whole bunch of new playlists in, so it's nice and neat and tidy looking now. I'm very proud. I've been meaning to do that for months. So there's a playlist there which is about deconstructing your job description. It shows me doing it live on one of these sessions. So if you watch both of those, hopefully you'll get a sense of how you can read the language of a job description and then identify from that what the key leadership principles are. What you can also do to try and identify that is ask your recruiter to tell you. They may not. Odds are probably about 50-50. And if you really want to go wild, you could contact some area managers through LinkedIn. It's very, very easy to find Amazon area managers on LinkedIn. Their job titles are very, very obvious. And see if any of them will share with you what they believe to be the important leadership principles for being an area manager. So although I cannot tell you, hopefully those are 3 different ways where you can actually find out the information. Anything to add to that one, Yevgeny?
Nope. Fully agree. Fully agree. So this is an interesting one. It says hiring manager and bar raiser. These individual rounds, are they elimination rounds? So I think there's something important in this question, but I don't really particularly understand what is an elimination round. It's only in a sports analogy, right? That I would imagine. I guess so. Gigi, let me know if you interpret it the same way. The person is probably asking whether if you bomb the hiring manager or a bar raise around, nothing else happens, right? Essentially,
Yeah.
you're not interviewed again. Okay.
I think
So
that's
in
the
this
right interpretation.
Okay. So if we assume that that's the right interpretation, then the answer is no. They're not elimination rounds. You're going to get all the interviews, however many interviews are in your panel or loop, and that will vary from team to team, and it will all vary with your level as well. But once that loop has been set, you're going to go through all of these interviews, and while you are going through your panel, no one will have access to the interview notes or gradings or rankings of your performance as a candidate in that system. So it's basically all blind until the debrief. And once everyone's entered their feedback in the system, once the debrief is there, then everyone can read each other's notes, and then everyone discusses. And then it's effectively up to the hiring manager and the bar raiser to make a decision whether to bring you on board or not. And the only difference with the bar raiser is that the bar raiser has a veto power over the hiring manager to reject a candidate. But if a hiring manager doesn't want to bring the candidate on board, then the bar raiser can't do anything about it either. So I hope that answers the question. Gigi, is that a good summary?
Yes, the only thing I'll add is I'll point you to a video on the YouTube channel, which says, I think the title is "What Happens If I Fail My Bar Raiser Interview." It goes into a little bit more detail in terms of how the actual process works in quite deep detail that Yevgeny beautifully summarized for you here.
Yes, but then you'll drop into a dungeon with a fire-breathing dragon. So Gigi goes into the detail about how exactly that happens. So, watch that video.
Like that, is it? Let's see. All right. So I'm going to pick this one. What other important questions can you expect in panel other than leadership/behavioral? So Diego, it depends entirely on the role that you are applying for. So if you are applying for a technical role, odds are that you may be facing some kind of functional questioning in your panel interview. If you are applying for a non-tech role, chances are you're unlikely to face any functional questions, and they will try and extrapolate from your behavioral answers your functional capabilities. The very best person to ask this question of for your specific use case, because it's very different, it can depend on, well, it does definitely depend on the role that you're applying for. It also depends on your team and your local team's preferences for how they run their interviews. So to get the proper answer to this question, you really should speak to your recruiter and ask for specific details about what types of questions you can expect in your panel. They're the only person that's going to be able to tell you that specifically. Anything to add?
Makes sense.
Evgeny?
No, makes sense.
Okay.
Let's keep going. So the question from Tech by Tiff. So sounds like you're interviewing for a non-tech program manager role at Amazon Ads. Great business to be in these days. and you have a recruiter prep today, and your hiring manager interviews on Wednesday. So the question is, how many LPs will be addressed with the hiring manager? So the answer is, I have no idea, and no one will have an idea. And the reason why is because it sounds like you are going from a recruiter prep call into a phone screen. And phone screens at Amazon are not as rigid and not sort of as typical as other. They don't have in common. They don't have a lot in common with each other. Hiring managers, or in fact anyone else who runs a phone screen, they can pull it together from different Lego blocks. One Lego block being some behavioral interview questions. Another Lego block would be to throw some functional competency questions at you, i.e., how well you understand the sphere of digital advertising or anything else that is of functional importance that's listed on your job description. So it's hard to predict how much weight the hiring manager will place on the functional versus behavioral. But I would say, if I were you, what I would do is I would look at the job description and really try to squeeze out the most frequently occurring leadership principles from that job description. If you you can do it yourself just by studying the job description. If you know the leadership principles, you can also watch our YouTube channel. So Gigi has I believe a specific playlist already that talks about how to do this. And then if you prepare situations for, let's say, the top two or top three most frequently occurring leadership principles from that job description, that will probably put you closer to what you might expect in that phone screen. But then again, just to be exactly transparent with you, like, phone screens are hard to predict. So expect everything, but that's a technique for you to potentially narrow it down to just a few leadership principles. Gigi, anything you'd add?
No, absolutely right. Awesome. All right, so I'm going to just pop her back. I just want to quickly put Simon up here so that we can congratulate him. Simon, you start your job as a program manager in November, and our content definitely helped. Well, yay! Congratulations. Delighted to hear it.
Congrats, well done.
Thank you for taking the time to join us and let us know your good news. We wish you a fantastic Amazon career.
Remember us when you become a hiring manager. Just saying. Shameless plug time.
Okay, I'm just going to do this question then. Hey, Stella. So you had an inclined loop. Okay, the role was given to another candidate. Is there a limit to how many times you can decline an alternative role? All right. Let me break this down into two parts for you. I think it's very unlikely that Amazon would just offer you another role on a plate and say, do you want to take this? That almost never happens. At the very least, you would need to meet a hiring manager whose role it is, and they have the opportunity to say whether they want to take you or not, in the same way you would have the same opportunity to say whether you're interested in the job or not. So that's kind of part one. Part two, then, is there a limit to the number of times that can happen? Either they say no to you or you say no to them. From a process or policy perspective, no. Your inclined outcome only lasts 6 months. So you're good for 6 months with that kind of pre-qualification. But once the 6 months is over, you have to start all over again. So although there's not a limit to the number of times it can happen, there is definitely a limit to the time period in which that inclined outcome is valid. Now, that said, there will inevitably come a point, if you had 50 of these backwards and forwards over a 3 or 4 month period, somebody somewhere is going to make a judgment call that it's probably not worth going back to you yet again with another opportunity to speak to a hiring manager if you have very consistently shown yourself to be not interested in the roles they're presenting to you. But there's no firm line in the sand that tells a recruiter exactly at what point that occurs. So I'm afraid that's far less kind of specific than I think you were probably looking for, but nonetheless, that is the reality of the situation. Anything I missed or misrepresented, do you think?
No, I think this was very detailed. All right. Do we want to take a little break, seeing
We're
as
on the
it's
half
half of the hour?
hour. Okay, so everybody, let me just pop Stella back in. There we go, Stella. I love the name Stella. It's such a great name.
Lovely name.
So everybody, Yevgeny and I obviously work incredibly hard between the YouTube channel, also our blog, also our Discord channel to provide you with as much support as we can reasonably manage. We do, however, need something in return from you. What we need from you is every single video of ours that you watch, we need you to either give it a thumbs up and write us a little comment under the video. The reason why we need you to do this is it's considered positive engagement signals for the YouTube algorithm. That tells the YouTube algorithm, excuse me, two things. Number one, that it is sharing our content with the right person. And number two, that those people actually like our content and our content is good. That then lifts us up higher in the algorithm. The YouTube algorithm has a bias towards tenure. It promotes stuff that has more views and more likes and comments. Well, clearly, the longer something is on a platform, the more likes and comments and views it accrues. So what there is a whole bunch of really old, quite poor, even done by people who have never worked at Amazon, content appearing above us in the algorithm, which is crazy. So we need your help to address that and give us some positive engagement signals. I'm going to ask you to do that right now for this specific video. And whilst you do that, I'm going to play you a little video purely because it amuses me and it'll just give you a few seconds. So I will do the me and Yevgeny one. It might be a bit loud, everybody, so be prepared. I keep saying I'll sort this out, and I consistently fail to do that. So I will try and sort that out, but be prepared. I don't want to blast your ears off. Here we go. Please do give us a thumbs up.
Please like the stream now. Please like the stream now. Please like the stream now. Please like the stream. 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 Like the stream.
There we go, everybody. I just put my headphones.
Amazing. Cracks me up each time that I watch this video. Nicely done, GG.
My problem is I can't think of another idea that can beat that one with either the song or the images. But I'll have to work on it because it's getting a bit old now.
Right.
All right. Have you had a chance to pick another one?
Yeah, I've got this one right. So before I pick one, so MK, I've seen a couple of more questions or a two-part question from you. I don't understand what you mean from behavioral interview to behavioral interview. So you probably need to, if you want us to answer it, maybe just clarify what is it that you've passed. So I'm just gonna skip over, and yeah, I'm just gonna do this one.
Yeah. Can I understand that one. Should I quickly go for it?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So I think the question is that MK thinks that he has cleared the behavioral interview and is expecting something else to happen afterwards, a different type of interview. It's not how it works. You have not cleared anything other than the round that you've gone through. So you can fully expect and be prepared to have behavioral interviews in every single round that you go through. Usually round one tends to not be particularly behavioral focused, especially if you're in a tech role. They have to cover off your kind of functional capabilities. Round two tends to have behavioral in it as well as functional. And then at loop, depending on whether you're doing a technical role or a non-technical role, you will definitely get behavioral questions again. It is not a clearing around type structure at Amazon. Amazon tests you for functional and behavioral, and they test you throughout the entire process. And then they'll keep testing you once you're inside Amazon as well. Okay, hope that makes sense. Sorry to jump on that, Evgeny, but made sense to me.
No, it's great. You got it. You explained it. So the one that I wanted to do is this one. So I had a full loop around 2 years ago and didn't get an offer, will they go back and look at that at all, or is it a complete fresh start? So it's not a complete fresh start, but at the same time, just because you failed the loop 2 years ago, it's not. It doesn't mean that you will never get a job at Amazon. A hiring manager will most likely look at your entire history of interactions with Amazon as a candidate, and they will be able to go and see what exactly happened in that loop. They're going to be able to read the feedback and notes of folks who uploaded them. And they're going to take it as an input because they decided to invite you to the interview, and it basically means that they're happy to give you a chance, even though you did not clear the loop 2 years ago. It's perfectly normal for candidates to not get a job one time and then go back even I would say months and even years after the initial unsuccessful experience and then get a job at Amazon. It's absolutely fine. In fact, we've had multiple examples here where folks didn't clear a loop at, let's say, an L6 and then came back as an L7 with one or two rejections in between. There's one extreme case that I can remember. So don't get disheartened or don't be overly concerned about that particular experience. Also, there's not a lot that you can control, right? Like you can't really manage for this. All you can control is your performance in this upcoming interview loop. And there's nothing really that you can influence about the past unless you're Marty McFly. Is that fair, do you think, Gigi?
Yeah. I love the analogy. Okay. Cool. So I'm gonna pick this one. Hi, Anna. So your recruiter told you to be prepared for behavioral questions from the hiring manager on phone screen. Should I also be prepared for functional questions? Finance manager role. Okay. So in theory, I would say to you, trust your recruiter, because your recruiter is going to be talking to the hiring manager and should have a really good insight into what the hiring manager plans to do at their interview. So on the one hand, I will say have faith in your recruiter. On the other hand, I will say that at some point, anyone in finance is going to have some functional testing because they have to understand that you can actually build models, or you have some basic SQL knowledge if SQL knowledge is required for the role. So I would check your job description because any particular functional skills that they expect from you should be detailed in the job description. You might want to be prepared for the fact that they might test you on that in your interview. Let's hope not, because your recruiter has told you it's just behavioral. But at some point, anybody in finance is going to have to be tested to a certain degree in terms of their knowledge of financial kind of models, structures, whatever type of work that they would plan for you to do when you join the business. Okay.
Yep,
that's
agreed.
it. I'll pop that one back
Cool.
in. You can pick another one.
So here's a question. How long and complex should my stories be for an L4 level? And can I repeat the story that I gave the hiring manager from the last round for the same question from another interviewer in the loop round? So there's two questions here. The first question is, how long and complex should the stories be for L4? So we don't really have an absolute sort of target for you in terms of seconds or minutes for an L4. All I would say to you is that the expectations in terms of complexity, I would say, yeah, complexity of situations and problems that you dealt with, and the intricacies and the drama of and the impact of individual situations, it kind of goes down as the level goes down and goes up as the level goes up, and it goes down quite noticeably. But I would say if let's say for a solid senior L6, you want to, I don't know, let's say if your story, the runtime is about 8 minutes, then for For an L6, you can probably go down to, I don't know, 6 to 5 minutes, but that is not a precise target for you. All I would say is go in as many details as you naturally would want to go into. Don't try to manage your runtime of a story to a particular target, because the risk of doing that is that you will omit important details that would either help you demonstrate behaviors that are relevant to the leadership principle, or the fact that you are able to handle the complexity and produce the right impact that they expect for an L4. So just tell the story as you believe you should be telling. The interviewer may interject anyway. You may get an interviewer who decides to do a conversational interview, which means that you'll share some facts, some information, and then the interviewer will ask you some follow-up questions right there and then, without necessarily allowing you to finish the whole story before they start asking questions. And in which case, you will naturally divulge all of the facts that the interviewer is interested in, because they're just going to keep quizzing you. So if I were you, I would just relax and tell the story in as many facts as you believe are relevant and demonstrate the right behaviors and the complexity and the impact of your projects, and just allow the interviewer to ask you if any additional details, and don't manage to a time. Definitely don't listen to any of the absolute rubbish guidance out there that says that a story needs to be 2 minutes long, because otherwise an interviewer falls asleep and loses interest. That is absolutely not true. Amazon will always prepare more details versus fewer details, if that makes any sense. Gigi, would you agree with the first question?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
And then in terms of repeating stories, so just generally speaking, repeating stories, we recommend to not repeat stories. So you're saying that you gave a story to the hiring manager from the last round, and you have the same question from another interviewer. So if that, it's unlikely to happen that you're going to have the same question from a different interviewer, unless it's a question that's similar but worded slightly differently. So between earns trust, but between earn trust and ownership, there's a question about not delivering on commitments, but it's worded slightly differently, right? It's worded slightly differently. So what I would do if I were you is I would just, if you believe it is indeed exactly the same question, just mention to the interviewer that someone from a previous round asked you exactly the same question, and just suggest that unless the interviewer wants you to do something else, you will respond with exactly the same story and see what the interviewer will do. It's very likely they're just going to back to the interview bank and pick a different question. Then, hey ho, that's going to work for you. Do you think that's fair, Gigi?
Yeah, the strategy, totally, absolutely right. The one caveat I'll add is actually this scenario is becoming increasingly an issue, because what has happened in more recent times is interviewers do not have access to the notes from previous rounds. Only hiring managers and bar raisers do. So if your interviewer is allocated the same leadership principle that the person in the round before was allocated, which is very likely because they will generally repeat all of the leadership principles in loop as they had in round 1 and round 2, the interviewer may well, by some strange, freaky coincidence, pick exactly the same question that your previous interviewer asked you, because they cannot see what your previous interviewer asked you. If that happens, to Yevgeny's point, do exactly as Yevgeny describes, but it is a increasing issue. Whether Amazon will think it's important enough to roll back why they decided to obscure notes to anybody other than the hiring manager and the bar raiser, who knows? But the strategy Yevgeny suggested is the right one. Okie dokie. Shall I pick one now?
Please do.
I will take two because this one is so quick. I will not be cheeky. So here we go. In the loop interview, Lena G. You sound like you should be a pop star, Lena. Lena G. That's very cool. Pop star. God, that really ages me, doesn't it? That phraseology.
Yes, you're referring to Honey G, which is an unsuccessful contestant in the British X Factor. That ages me as well.
Well, it was more the word pop star, really. I don't think anybody
Yes.
these days uses pop star. But anyway,
No.
moving on. can you expect tell me about yourself and why Amazon in loop? Yes, you most certainly can, but at this stage, it really is just a warm-up question. No bar raiser should be allowing the data gathered in these types of questions to be used as evidence as to whether to hire you or not. So yes, they're very likely to happen, but they're very likely to happen in terms of just people warming you up to get into the interview. 1 minute and no more on that answer. Literally 1 minute on explaining that, and then get them to move into the behavioral interview questions or functional questions, whichever it is, which is where the real evidence is gathered from. And then I will do this one as well. Hey, Sandeep. Okay, how to answer questions like, tell me about a time when you gave a simple solution to a complex problem if I haven't actually faced those scenarios in your previous experience. Okay, well, we'll ignore the specific question that you've put, the tell me about a time when you gave a simple solution to a complex problem, because the question is agnostic of what the specific question is. You're asking me, what do you do if you are asked a question that you have not got a real experience or example prepared for? So, as always, there is already a video about this on the YouTube channel. I will attempt to summarize it now. There are two things you can do. The first thing is, if you have an example that you think is kind of similar, not quite right, but kind of similar, what you can do is say to your interviewer, I'm sorry, I don't have an exact example, but I've got one that I think is almost there, and describe it to them very, very high level, like 3 or 4 sentences. Is it okay if I use that? They may say yes, because they may feel that they'll probably get what they were looking for from that as much as they would have done the other one. Or they may say, no, I'm sorry, that's just not going to work for me. If they say, no, I'm sorry, that's not going to work for me, or if you don't feel you have any example that comes anywhere close answering that question, we suggest you say, look, I'm really sorry. I don't have an example that I think fits. I don't want to waste your time or my opportunity. Can I please have another question? You can definitely ask for other questions. I've seen some bad advice from another YouTube channel on Amazon that suggests that you cannot do that. They're wrong. You absolutely can. You just don't want to do it too often, because if you too often say, I do not have an example of that happening to me, I do not have an example of that happening to me, I do not have an example of that happening to me, your interviewers are going to say, well, looks like this person's got limited experience if they can't come up with examples for these key scenarios that we're interested in gathering evidence on, and therefore you're probably not going to get hired. So the number of times that you can get away with it there's no kind of firm rules about that. I would suggest definitely no more than once in any single interview across your loop, depending on how many interviews you have. Some people will only have 3, other people will have up to 10 interviews. So, I would say 1 out of 5, you probably, at most 2 out of 5, if you kind of multiply those ratios up and multiply those ratios down, depending on how many interviewers you have, you'll probably get away with. I think that's it. Is there anything you'd add, Yevgeny?
No. There's nothing to add. Very detailed.
Pop them
Right.
back.
So here's a topic I'm quite passionate about, and that is resumes. So Guy Banner is, which could be, I think, a superhero or superheroes.
Bruce's
sidekick.
cousin or brother.
Yeah, exactly. Who comes to his rescue when he's trapped somewhere? Any tips on preparing a CV or resume to be selected for a phone screen interview? Yeah, so I'll give you some tips as an ex-hiring manager, right? And I think I honestly think that these are the simplest to implement, and that is, what you want to do is, first of all, you want to make sure your resume is very easy to read, because inviting you to a phone screen is entirely a human decision. There's nothing to do with algorithms or trying to hack into systems and automations. It's literally a human, like a hiring manager, is looking at your resume and deciding whether to invite you or not. So you want to make sure that your resume is very, very easy to read. What does that mean? It means there are no brownie points, and there's absolutely no benefit for any design elements of the resume that make it more difficult to read. I have reviewed a ton of resumes that had various different skill bars and a whole bunch of other design paraphernalia for which folks have shelled out hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And All of that, to be honest, at best I would just skip over, and at worst, if it crowds, if it makes the resume very difficult to understand, I would just pass on that profile, because I just can't see how that profile is relevant. Now, I'm not saying that you should just type out your resume in Times New Roman font 11. No, by all means, pick a design. Just make sure that it's neat and tidy and very easy for a human eye to read. A second tip from me is that you want to make sure that your resume demonstrates impact. So Amazon, differently to other companies, other tech companies, they're not just hiring the most skilled and smartest person in the room. They want to see evidence that you have applied your skills, whether those skills are certified and you've got some hard certifications or not, right? Like various different marketing innovation skills that don't necessarily have to have a certification behind them. They want to make sure that you have actually deployed and used these skills in real life scenarios. So when you're writing out your bullet points under every role, make sure that it's very clear what you have accomplished and how you accomplished it. And so the what is the impact, and the how is, well, what's the magic, right? What's the functional magic that you use to get there? My last tip would be purge all non-relevant information, including information that a lot of folks out there on the internet recommend, without actually knowing anything about how these tech companies are hiring, such as get rid of hobbies. Yes, I've heard multiple times that hobbies, they demonstrate that you're a multifaceted individual. I'll be honest with you. Hobbies, when you're including hobbies and other stuff like that, personal facts in your resume, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get the potential hiring manager be biased towards your profile because they're part of the same group as you. That's what you're trying to do. And that's exactly what Amazon is educating their hiring managers to avoid. So as a hiring manager, I would completely disregard hobbies. Also, hobbies are sometimes annoying because, as a hiring manager, I don't really have a lot of time to scan resumes. So I just want to see stuff that's relevant. And most hobbies are completely irrelevant. So I would just throw them out of the resume. So these would be my tips. But Gigi, I'm sure you've got some of yours.
Because I was distracted, did you note putting in numbers and impact in your results?
So I didn't necessarily talk about numbers, but what I did say is that under every role, you want to marry together impact and skill. So, for example, put the what in terms of what you've achieved, and then how you did it to connect a skill to it. But I didn't mention that when you're talking about the what of achievement, that you need to use numbers.
So that would just be my only addition for the what is be very specific. Amazon wants to see that you are able to move the dial for your previous employer because they obviously want to hire someone who's going to move the dial for them. So be super specific about how you have changed a particular metric, a particular top line number, etc., etc. Okie dokie, it's my turn then. I'm going to pick this one because we love this question. So, hey, Diego, hola. Mind you, that was a bit of an assumption. Your content helped me get a panel for a non-technical manager next week. You've prepared 2 cases per leadership principle. Excellent, brilliant, exactly what we suggest you should do. What if during the panel you can't identify the leadership principle? Should I just use WE? I don't know what W/E. To me, that's the weekend. But example, whatever. Whatever. That's a new one, isn't it?
Nice one. I was completely lost. I'm like, what is that?
Whatever example you see best. Super simple. Answer the question. Right? Just answer the question. If you answer the question and keep thinking about answering the question, if you haven't focused on quite the right part of the question, it's your interviewer's job to get you moving in that direction. So if you're really not sure what the leadership principle is, and you've said to yourself, okay, I'm just going to answer the question. So tell me about a metric that you use to identify a problem in your team. That's a potential question. give an example of a time you spotted a number that made you think, something's not right here. If you start talking about if you quickly move to how you change things, actually that question is a dive deep question. Your interviewer's job will be to say, hang on a second, Diego, can we just go back a step? Tell me about when you saw the number, where did you go next? Who did you speak to? What did you look at? You have to have your ears open, because when your interviewer asks you a follow-up question, particularly if they interrupt you, that's a signal to say, I'm possibly not giving them the information that they're looking for. So just answer the question and keep your ears open for any interruptions or follow-up questions that your interviewer has, because that will be a cue as to whether you're potentially heading in a different direction to the one they want you to go in. That would be my advice. Yevgeny, anything to add?
No, nothing to add. And I can answer one more question and then I need to run.
Oh, is it that time already? Gosh, doesn't it fly?
It flies. It flies so quickly. Right. I absolutely love this question. So, is it recommended to just prepare stories that match the core LPs of the role and then adaptively match them to whatever questions asked? I mean, there's no way to predict what loopers want to ask. So, first of all, let's talk about what you shouldn't be doing. So, you on the internet, you will be able to find questions that are frequently asked in Amazon interviews. But in the official interview bank, there's, I believe, something like 180 questions. I don't really remember, but it's something like it's a ridiculous number, right? So what will definitely not work is trying to create one piece of content per question, because there's just way too many questions. So that you cannot do. Now, what you should be doing is, first, you need to try and limit the number of leadership principles that you're preparing content for. How do you do it? You need to try and squeeze out the leadership principles from the job description. You can do this by just looking for keywords that relate to these leadership principles. As we mentioned on this show today, we have some content in our YouTube channel that talks exactly how to do it. So just go to our YouTube channel and watch it. It's super useful. We also, if you need some help doing that, we also run a service that helps, that essentially we do it for you, and specifically Gigi does it for you. So just join our free community, and Gigi will talk to you about how to do it, and then we'll send you the link on where you can book that service. But essentially, yeah, the first thing that you want to do is you want to limit the number of leadership principles that you're preparing the content to. By the way, another thing that you can do is you can ask your recruiter to share the focal or the core leadership principles that the hiring manager believes are critical for someone to do well in this job. In 50% of cases, they'll tell you. In the other 50% of cases, they won't. So once you've limited the number of leadership principles for which you prepare content, what you want to make sure is that you've got 2 situations per leadership principle. These situations, you need to try to make these situations as different as possible. So it is possible you can reuse the same situations for, let's say, 2 leadership principles if you're struggling to come up with the breadth of content that covers that gives you 2 pieces of content per LP without overlaps. Ideally, that's what you do. If you can't do that, then yes, you can reuse one situation. We don't recommend reusing it more than twice, but you need to make sure that the only thing that is similar or the same between these 2 situations is just the opening context. And from then on, you have to be selling a completely different set of behaviors. Now, in order to guide you more into what sort of themes and sub-themes you need to be able to cover with these situations, this is where I have to recommend our product, which is the Amazon Interview Whiz course. What we do there is we go under the skin of every leadership principle, and we give you the main themes, which we call facets of every leadership principle. You can see how we do this by getting our free course. So there's Gigi will tell you at the end of the show. Make sure you stay until the very end. And when you get our free course, you will just see exactly what we do, and it's on customer obsession. And unless Actually, I don't know a single role where customer obsession would not be one of the LPs. So it's probably a good thing for you to get it anyway. And so that's how you do it. There is no way to predict what the loopers want to ask. The only thing is, again, if you ask your recruiter to send you the interview outline, sometimes they'll send you a Word doc with the names of the interviewers and the leadership principles that they want to interview you on. So for the chance that they will do it, do pop a question, and then you never know. Maybe they will. They do sometimes. Anything you'd add, Gigi?
No, that was perfect.
All righty, guys. It's been great. Please stay until Gigi finishes the show, because she's got a really cool freebie to give you guys, and you're going to find it super useful. Take care, folks.
Thanks again. Good to see you.